for a sign to proceed forward.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, everyone, welcome Tom Check. Tom, tell us, introduce yourself and let's just get after it.
Yeah, so my name is Tom. I've been what I call a helper for about a decade now. So running a nonprofit that did group mentoring for youth, doing leadership development, also doing life coaching. So kind of lots of different hats, but all within that helper role. And today's an interesting kind of presentation. I was given the topic, which I think is always an interesting kind of way for a presenter to kind of have to express themselves. So today we're going to be talking about working with invisible disabilities. And it's going to be an interesting talk. So I'll just kind of dive right in with, let's start with what it isn't. So this is the first and probably only time this presentation will happen. So it's not going to go perfectly. We all know that there's probably typos. There might be some timing issues. Plus it's a hybrid event. Here I am on Zoom with Carl, and here you all are there. There's bound to be some glitches along the way, but that's okay. We'll get through it. Today is not a sales pitch. So I don't know about you. I've been to networking events where it's a half hour or an hour long of somebody telling me why I need to buy their service. This ain't that. Today is not going to do all sorts of stuff. It's not going to increase your business's SEO rankings. It's not going to solve all your problems, right? That's not what today is. What today is going to be an interactive opportunity to step a little bit out of your comfort zone. It's going to be an invitation to connect with the person next to you. And hopefully it creates some kind of reaction for you. Good, bad. I don't think, as long as there's a reaction, I think it's worth doing, as long as we're paying attention to the reaction. So where does this come from? This comes from the type of work that I did primarily in the life coaching sphere, really helping people start to identify why they often are working against themselves. There's this recognition that we all tend to know what we should be doing, but we don't always execute on that. And so today is an exploration around kind of why that is and what to start doing to get around it. So I will say before we dive in, I'm going to ask you all to write some stuff down throughout. There will be some things you write down that are just for you, and there will be some things you write down that are for sharing with your neighbor. I'll make sure to call those out as they come up, but make sure you've got a pen and paper because it is kind of important that you write the stuff down. Otherwise, you'll go to share with your neighbor and you feel a little flat-footed. So I'll give you all a chance to grab some paper and pens. All right. So I've never met any of you, but I've got some guesses about who you are, right? I'm assuming because this is a chamber mixer, that you are all business people, you're professionals who are making a living, having natural desires like wanting people to like them. Maybe you didn't get the handbook for how to do everything perfectly. And generally, I'm assuming that you all kind of know that you're capable of at least a little more than what you're doing right now. And that's really where some of the tension comes into our lives, right? So what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at this list, and I want you to just write down either something from this list or something that comes up into your head. What's the most important thing for you in your life, right? What's most important for you? So take a couple seconds and just write down whatever comes to mind. And next up, both of these are just for you. I want you to write down, what do you perceive as the thing that keeps you from fully living up to that most important thing you wrote down just before? What keeps you from living up to that most important thing? And as you last couple folks finish writing down what you're doing, already this is kind of a different type of presentation than maybe most of us are used to sitting in. So thanks for being willing to get on what I call the skinny branches with us. So I'm going to kind of lay out what I've seen here, right? What's the problem? The problem that most of us run into is that there's a lot going on out there, right? You've got so much to balance, to focus on, to anticipate, to resolve. You've got a network, right? Thank you, West St. Charles Chamber of Commerce. You've got sales to make. You've got strategy to define and contracts to review and marketing to manage and people to develop and tasks to delegate. And that's just at work, right? Because there's a whole human here. And so you've also got to eat healthy-ish. You got to close those rings on your Apple Watch by getting your steps in. You got to spend quality time with the people you love. You got to remember to take time for yourself. You got to do the laundry. You got to walk the dog. You got to deal with COVID, and on and on and on, right? Like, it's a busy world that we live in. So what do? We do the most natural thing in the world. We make it busy in here. Right? We tell our minds that we have to manage all of this stuff. You put your mind in charge of managing the sales, the strategy, the contracts, the marketing, the people, the family time, what to eat, what to do. And at the end of the day, what you've done is you've given your mind an impossible task. You've said, in this limited 16 hours or so that most of us get to be awake during a day, not only do I have to get everything done, but everybody has to like me while I do it. My business has to be growing. I have to feel happy, and I can't mess up, right? You've given your mind this impossible task. Oops. Let's make sure we click on the right one. So I want you to imagine that you hire a new employee at your company, and you gave them this impossible task. You told them that part of their job was that they had to manage all the sales, they had to manage all the marketing, they had to do people development, they had to schedule out the day, they had to get lunch for everybody. And by the way, it all has to go really well. On the scale of like okay to perfect, it's got to be in the great to perfect zone. I want you to take a couple seconds, take 30 seconds, and write down what you think would happen to that employee when they get that job list.
That's it. Done. Thank you. You might not make it to lunch. By the way, you're the biggest boy ever. You suck.
And as you all start wrapping up what you're writing, right, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like, oh man, we recognize that maybe that's what we've done to ourselves. So now I want you to take the next minute or so, and I want you to write down what happens to you when you try to live up to this impossible task. What happens to you when you have to do it all from great to perfect all the time? And as you finish writing down whatever you're writing down, we're going to take a couple minutes to be interactive, because the last thing I want for any of us is death by PowerPoint. So what we're going to do is we're going to share. You're going to turn to a partner, and Carl, my wonderful other Zoom buddy, you're going to chat with me directly. And you're gonna just talk about one of those two things. You don't have to share both, whichever one you're more comfortable with, whichever one's more fun with you. You're gonna share what happens either to that employee or what happens to you with this impossible task. The way that this works is I'm gonna give you 60 seconds to share. I'm gonna click a big thing, the screen will turn purple. It'll tell you to switch partners because I know it gets loud when everybody's right. So what's our natural reaction to this, right? The natural reaction to being busy in our minds is that a couple of things happen. One, our timeline for decision making shrinks, right? When I go on like a week-long vacation and I don't do any work on vacation, suddenly it's like I can see into the future 5, 10, 15 years. I'm coming up with these great brainstorming ideas of like where my company's going to go, where my life is going to go. I've got space to like really look into the future and start to make these bigger picture plans. But as life piles more and more onto your plate, that timeline shrinks. On a crazy day when you've got back-to-back meetings and you've got report deadlines and people keep knocking on your door, you're lucky if you can see 30 minutes into the future, right? You're lucky if you can make a decision that lasts to the end of the week. And we get stuck in this reaction mode, right? And what do? We're not willing to make time during that. So we step into fix-it mode. We turn into firefighters. And then we go from like being a whole human to just barely surviving, right? The other thing that tends to happen is you have to make concessions. You only get so much time in your day, right? So the report's due at the end of business today and people keep knocking on your door. You have to choose. Do I finish the report and be a little short with the staff? Or do I make space for my staff and miss the deadline? Do I work late to check all the boxes and feel guilty about not spending quality time with my kids? Or do I get home on time and spend the time with my kids thinking about work? There's no right or wrong answers here. That's kind of the tendency of our mind is to tell us that it's bad one way or the other. But we have to make choices given how crazy our world is. And so there's consequences to any choices you make. Now, the interesting idea here is like, okay, the report is due at the end of business and people keep knocking on your door. Both of those you're probably pretty well equipped to handle either or both of those. But what happens when things start to happen where one of those decisions is something you feel really confident and capable in, and the other one you feel a little less capable and confident in? Well, generally, the more overloaded you are, the more you're going to step into the things you feel like you know how to do. You're going to stay in your comfort zone, right? And so you should make that sales call that you've been dreading, but you also need to finish that darn report you didn't get to yesterday. And which do you do? The more stressed out you are, the more likely you are to avoid the sales call and do the thing that you perceive as easier. And that totally makes sense, right? Of course you do. You know how to do that thing. You've got a rough idea of how long it'll take. And in your gut, you kind of know that it's going to work out okay. Whereas that sales call, I don't always know so much, right? So then our brain does this really interesting thing, right? Because it made a decision to do the easy thing. But your heart, though, your heart is smart. And it knows you're taking the easy way out of some of these choices. And it knows that that's not going to serve you big picture. And so what happens is your mind has to start to justify its choices. It has to start to externalize the problem. Because let's be honest, it's not that I don't want to make that sales call. It's that person on the other end of the line that I need to call is kind of an a-hole. And they're hard to work with. And they're probably not going to say yes anyway. And it's probably not worth calling them like ever. And all of a sudden what I've done is I've taken my choice to do the easy thing. And I've externalized it to be that person that's the problem. And this is something our brains do without us even recognizing it, right? It's traffic's fault I'm late. It's my kid's fault that I can't focus when I'm on a Zoom meeting at home. It's their fault. And that's really natural, but it's not terribly helpful. So what happens when this goes on, when you start externalizing all of this stuff, is that the tension builds and you become more anxious, more depressed, more angry, more avoidant, more biased, more negative, right? So here's that topic that you all gave me for this conversation is, here's your invisible disabilities. But I position these as symptoms of the underlying problem of the busy mind. They're not the cause of the problems in our life. They're just a symptom of the fact that here we are having to make do with what we've got and having to make choices on a regular basis. So you wrote some things down earlier. You wrote down what you view as your most important thing and what you perceive as your biggest challenge to that important thing. Now, here we are, only literally a couple of minutes later. I want you to look at those two items you wrote down. And I want you to take 60 seconds to write down if maybe those are true, maybe they are just a symptom. And if they're a symptom, what's going on underneath in your life that's causing them? Now, this is just for you. You're not going to share this with a partner. So be as honest as you can be with yourself. And I'll give you 60 seconds, which is never enough time. And as you finish writing whatever's coming up, just want to point out that this is the type of stuff that most of us rarely make time for, to sit and actually investigate what's going on. We're now stepping out of firefighter mode, right? We're stepping out of survival, stepping into something a little bigger. There's a truth about life, and it's that you get a choice. Your whole life hinges on it. And the choice is you can have a hard life of doing easy things. You can consistently do the thing that you already know how to do, even if you know it's not going to lead you where you want to go. You end up in the cycle of getting so busy in here to keep up with out there that there's never really room for you to live the life you want. Don't get me wrong, you can accomplish some really, really cool things in this way. But your mind is so busy that you never seem to really enjoy those accomplishments for very long. That busyness leads to those short-term decisions, taking the easy way out. And your choices to do the easy things lead to justification and externalization. And then you're always in a battle with you and the world. There's another choice. It's an easier life of doing the hard things. Oh, little one. You step into the challenging world of managing your mind instead of managing the task list. You opt to step back more often and determine what's important and why. Again, there's no right or wrong choices here. Plenty of people go through life doing easy things, accomplishing things, but not really enjoying it. And plenty of people also take the time to take a step back and make those harder decisions to do the things they're not terribly good at, that they know in their heart will take them where they need to go. So this is an opportunity to recognize that if you thought I was going to give you the answer to how to do this, sorry, Charlie, I don't have your answers, but you do. That's the cool part about life coaching, right? I don't have to have your answers because you've already got them. You might just not be used to looking for those answers, but they're in there. And when you get past the noise of your brain and all that craziness that it's working on, that impossible task, when you sit in that discomfort of kind of quiet space by yourself, you can find them. So let's not do that yet. What I want you to do real quick is we're going to ask you to write something else. And again, this one's just for you, although you can share it if you want. But I want you to share, or I'm sorry, I want you to write down what's the one thing that you know in your heart of hearts that you need to start doing to live the life that matters the most to you. What's that one thing that you could do that you've been avoiding maybe? Take 60 seconds. That's a hard one. Normally we would take a couple life coaching sessions to get here, but I'm assuming we can get here in 15 minutes today. So if it's a little challenging, that's okay. Write down whatever comes up. And do that little investigation of yourself. It's not the type of thing a lot of us make time for on a regular basis. and it's not comfortable. It's the hard thing to do. So thanks for doing the hard thing. Now we'll step into the more fun thing, right? The social thing. So kind of like last time, I'm going to give you 3 minutes to talk instead of switching partners, because I realize that kind of makes it a little harder to be in the conversation. What I'll do is I'll just make it, you pick the person next to you. One of you is going to talk for 3 minutes on what did you learn about yourself via this conversation? How does this change what you focus on? Why is it important? If you want to share some of the stuff you wrote down just for you, that's totally up to you, but it's not expected. And then after 3 minutes, when the screen says switch partners, just allow the other person to talk for 3 minutes. Does that make sense? Okay, fantastic. Isn't that so much fun to just get to connect with the people around you, kind of both on the deep end and some of the other stuff in life that's going on. So good work. That's fun stuff. So I'd be remiss if I didn't offer at least, a little bit of advice from somebody who has not that I'm an expert, but just that I've helped plenty of people in this space. Remember that it's a choice, right? First and foremost is remember that you get a choice. The world doesn't get to tell you how to run your 16 hours a day. You get a say. And every choice you make comes with consequences, right? Good, bad, and different. Sometimes you choose to be a little short with staff, and they'll say that you're angry. Sometimes the report doesn't get done on time, and they call you lazy. That's okay. You made a choice. You have to let yourself make the choice. At the end of the day, our brains are incredibly effective at making it seem like the consequences are incredibly huge. The stakes are high. Our world will end if we do it wrong. It's probably not true, right? At the end of the day, here we are on a clod of dirt, circling a sun, racing through infinite space. If we don't get the report in on time, it's probably not the end of everything. Remember to take time for yourself, right? It's easy to let the busyness out there create busyness in here. The only way out of that trap is to take time, and especially take time when you feel like you can't. That feeling of there's not enough time is a really great indicator that you've gotten stuck back in the loop and that you're not making the decisions that are going to make the most meaningful life for you. To quote the hip hop artist Drake, love people and use things, not the other way around. Right? Like we get wrapped up in thinking that the things are going to fix our problems, whether that's a material thing or whether it's that book, that seminar, that workshop, that whatever. Nothing out there is going to solve the problems going on in here. And keep, remember perspective. Don't take yourself too seriously. You get to have fun if you want on the years that you're given in this world. Try and remember that and try and have fun, because you got into this business for a reason. Hopefully it's because you liked some aspect of what you do. And to have to go through every day barely surviving, firefighting, means that you're not really enjoying it anymore. And you're worth enjoying life, right? Like you deserve to enjoy your day-to-day experience. So just keep that in mind as it gets a little more overwhelming and as life tries to add more to your plate. That's what I've got for you today. I hope it was useful. I'm happy to answer any questions. But yeah, that's all it is. There's no sales pitch. Be good people. Do awesome things.
That was absolutely brilliant. Anybody? Yes.
Thank you.
Really very high value in a very short period of time. Anybody have any questions for Tom or any comments?
It was a really great class, something that I needed to start doing, take a step back and kind of ask myself those type of questions and kind of clear some of the fogginess in my brain. So I really appreciate it. Really.
My pleasure. We think about like those business retreats that we all know are so valuable, right? Why are they valuable? Because they get us out of the firefighting, they get us out of all the busyness of the meetings and the Zoom calls and the got to do this. And that's our space where we go strategize for the business. We need those times for ourselves too.
Very applicable to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed there was no shortage of conversation going on.
And I think it's hard right now, everything that you talked about, because I think we all kind of settled into our ways during COVID a little bit. And then we got thrown back into the real world. And it's been hard getting, you went from not having a lot of things planned and your schedule wasn't really overwhelming, and then it fired back up, and it's been an adjustment, even though it was what normal life was, but kind of call it a silver lining, if you will, was the nice part. How COVID was just the slowing down for a little bit.
Yeah, we got to focus on ourselves.
Yeah.
We got to focus on ourselves and make decisions based on what we wanted to do. And then I know some of us just jumped right back into like the same old. Let's do everything.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And that's a great point, that recognition that we do need to focus on ourselves. So many of us, we are the servant leaders. We're the ones who want to be there for everybody else. And we kind of forget that if I'm not whole, I can't be there for everybody else, right? Like I can't manage the emotional status of my entire staff if I'm so overwhelmed and overloaded that I can barely make it through the day without crying, right? So to take some time and focus on ourselves is really, really important, but it's what a lot of us have been taught not to do, right? So it's a challenge to kind of come back to that and realize it's not selfish to take time for ourselves, but it's necessary so that we can be present for others as well.
The other thing, Tom, is, I'm thinking about as you're talking is what message are we sending to other people when we're always doing everything? I was telling these guys a little bit ago, so I have a virtual assistant, and I always tell her things like, if I might ask her about a new task, I'm like, I want to make sure that she's going to enjoy it. I don't want to overwhelm her. Friday, like I have an idea. I schedule it so she gets it Monday morning, so she's not thinking about it Friday through over the weekend, because she will. So, but these are things I don't do for myself. That's the whole thing. And so, what kind of example am I setting? Like, as leaders, what example are we setting for others? We don't do what we know is actually the right thing to do, which is helpful for me to think about, because that'll make it up.
Because people follow our model, not our words, right? They don't do what we say, they do what we do, because that's what we're actually telling them is the expectation. So even if we say, take your PTO, but then I somehow have 500 hours of PTO racked up because I never take a vacation, right? It's no surprise that my staff doesn't either, because they're looking to me to say, is this acceptable? Yeah, be the model. Fantastic, folks. Well, good work. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me. It's always a great time to get to present. I'm sorry I wasn't there in person. It's always more fun to be in person. But I think this went fairly well given the kind of the box of restrictions we put ourselves in. So thanks for participating. Thanks for doing good work out in the community. And I will give you all the last 10 minutes to just kind of check in with each other and have a fun chat. How does that sound?